Welcome to Bet On It, Shooting from the Hip. My name is Beitullah. Damn it, I'm kind of a little bit discombobulated. Sorry. I'm feeling really giddy. I appreciate you being here. Please keep in mind what we're doing here on Bet On It, Food for Thought and Shooting from the Hip. We explore human ideas, philosophies, and noteworthy information. This exploration is us thinking aloud, a thought exercise, if you will, jumping into ideas and examining them and then re-examining them. You will find we're prone to using adult language when expressing opinions. In keeping with that, you shouldn't believe a single damn thing we say. We are not experts of any kind. We are just having fun with these ideas, philosophies, and information, in the hopes you will find it fun and interesting and entertaining. We encourage you to invest time into searching out these subjects and coming to your own conclusions. Now on with the shit show. Slam, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. How's it going?
Another week, another dollar?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Yeah, just no dollar.
No dollars, just weeks?
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. Today's episode, we're going to be discussing love, fear, divorce, and relationships, and everything else that goes with those individual topics. So it's, I don't know about you, Slim, but for me, it's something that I consider very often. I think about it only because, again, how problematic it seems that relationships can become and are, and then the question of successful relationships versus those that are not successful, or those that experience an initial success, but given enough time, it wanes with time. So I thought that this is kind of timely, and I don't think it's something we ever discussed in terms of love, like to break down because love's got so many facets to it, which I thought was very interesting, and that maybe the opposite, discuss what perhaps the opposite of love is. And the obvious, I think for most people, if you were to ask them, they would answer fear. But myself personally, I think it might be indifference, right? So let's just jump into it. So love has been defined as an intense feeling of deep affection, also a great interest and pleasure in something, a profoundly tender, passionate affection for another person. So I'm sure that you've experienced this.
Oh yeah, every Valentine's Day.
When you're parting with your money for candy, gifts and flowers. You don't do that?
No. They just put chocolate everywhere, and I just feel love.
Oh, is that it? So you love chocolate? That's a great love. Kind of boring though. After a while, it's always the same. Yeah, no.
No, different. You buy different chocolate. That's the trick.
Okay, so under that definition, we can see that the idea of love is it's an intense experience that we have as individuals, and everybody who's listening to this, that the two of you that are actually listening, I think they can all draw from their own experience, and they know what that feels like, particularly when the love's unrequited. So they love someone who doesn't love them, but also when they love somebody who in return expresses the same affection for them. So, and I often remark how curious it is how distressing love can be, for this overwhelming sensation that it can lead to a lot of confusion and even misunderstanding, right? Because it's such a wild experience. Now, as an emotion, it's something that psychologically we experience, but it manifests physically too. So much like most emotions, it does produce a real physical response in the individual, right? So now now, having said that, I mean, uh, the many facets and the way that love is presented to us, because there's many aspects to love. So it's not, so even though that one definition tries to sum up what love is, I don't think it adequately describes the many faces of love, right? Because love comes in a lot of sometimes strange forms, right? So having said that, we're going to start with romantic love, and to me, romantic love uh, is essentially chemistry between two people. So it doesn't matter if they're the same sex or they're or even monogamous or heterosexual or whatever. That romantic love, I think, in part is this biological chemistry you experience when you encounter somebody you're attracted to. You know, do you know what I'm talking about? Have you experienced what I'm talking about? Where
Yeah.
you get just that sensation of attraction, right?
Yeah, you might meet a lady in a random spot, and then like something about her is more attractive than the relatively equal attractive people around her. It's just there's a more quality
right.
force.
So, and it almost feels like it's directed at you, like it's meant on, like it's only you who's experiencing it, although that's probably not true. I mean, I'm sure if they draw that out of you as an individual, they're drawing it out of other people as well, and that they may actually experience that themselves. But romantic love for me is just, I would go so far as to say that it's just the initial attraction, and you can, and depending on what degree that you want to react to that attraction, it's up to you, the individual. So for some, it could, in a very short period of time, lead to sexual congress. In other instances, it may be a slow burn. It'll be like, it'll open up the potential for a relationship, which then it'll eventually lead to a sexual relationship. But like I said, I find romantic love probably the least genuine out of all the different forms of love that's out there, because it's reactionary, it's spur of the moment, it's the kind of thing you feel, and you feel it intensely, that if you leave, you may not ever not experience it again with that person, right? You, might even almost, you might almost say that it might even be circumstantial, in that, like, under the right circumstances, you'd have this this potent attraction to one another. Agree, disagree, don't care.
No, I would agree. It's interesting to like point out. Oh, sorry, very burpy today. It's interesting.
Gas.
Yeah.
You got the gas.
Yes, sir. That was a fake one. Anywho, I was just gonna say it's pretty interesting because it seems like other issues we talked about before, like you get super goal oriented, you get set on these results, so like you're invested, and then when that romantic love isn't exactly the way you idealize, which most people do, it's like, oh, all of a sudden it's like this super positive thing became. It's not quite what I wanted, or this or that. It becomes an obsession.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you point that out. I would agree that whatever the initial attraction is, it might not have staying power. So that's the thing, right? Like, so I think it's very common to be attracted to other people, right? To find yourself drawn to them. But that, just because you have an attraction to them, doesn't mean that they make for a good long-term partner.
Right.
It might be suggestive because it's reactionary, that they're only meant to be sort of in the moment. So then the question becomes, how much of that moment are you going to share with them? Are you going to cross lines of intimacy? Are you just going to enjoy each other's company and it never go any further than just this really, like, positive up kind of experience with somebody that doesn't lead to anything, right? So to me, it's like you said, romantic love is often idealized. And so our ideal, we're projecting so much on that moment. We encounter somebody and then we idealize them. And then the more time you spend with them, the less they fit that expectation or the way that you idealize them. But in that moment, that initial rush, like, like everybody, I remember, I always found it super thrilling to experience that sort of thing. But it's like a roller coaster ride. I'm not sure that it was meant for like long-term use. You don't get on a roller coaster and spend a half hour riding. Like it's a 2-3 minute ride, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So maybe then in terms of chemistry or romantic love, like that you share that with somebody, that you should go into it maybe with your mind open to the idea that like there might not be anything here. We're just experiencing this chemistry, this rush, this moment, and just enjoy the moment. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't act or you shouldn't try to invest yourself in them, but I think I think you do yourself a disservice if you start immediately seeing wedding bells and start projecting it in your future. I'm like, just appreciate the ride for what it is. This might be another one of those many aspects of humans. They're transient, they're temporary. It's not meant to be substantial, right? Like, does that make any sense what I just said?
Yeah, I was thinking there's definitely some places where you could see um, there's people that go in with this idea that there's going to be a long-term thing going out of it, and they might have this expectation, and like that's a reason for staying or for leaving. But it's ultimately like it's strange that you would have the expectation that you know exactly what you're getting. So you don't. They don't know what they are. You don't know what you are.
No,
This is a process.
it's in the moment, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you point that out again. That like you shouldn't be looking too far down the road or beyond where you are in that current moment in time.
Right.
So a little bit of support for that. So the chemistry in a romantic love, according to the American Psychological Association's online dictionary, it suggests that sexual arousal is an especially important component of this type of love. So romantic love. So it is so when I say chemistry, you are sexually attracted to the person, right? So again, the idea of building having long vision, a long-term plan based on sexual arousal is probably not a good way to approach it, right? That you should treat it for what it is, that it's temporary, and you're having the experience in the moment, and as a result of having the experience in the moment, you have the freedom to enjoy each other's company, but without trying to predict the future from it. Like, how often in the course of like living, and because I've had the benefit of having a long life, I've got to experience a lot of things. You go to house parties, or you traditionally used to meet people in nightclubs and bars. Nowadays you do it all online. That in the course of like trying to in interacting with them, the whole point is for you to be aroused, right? And you engage to that end, right? Like that's why we socialize. I can't speak to same-sex coupling, but I'm sure it's exactly the same as heterosexuals. I'm heterosexual, so I can only use my experiences as a reference point. So always found it engaging to go out, and on the off chance that you might encounter somebody, and there would be a lot of times where I would encounter somebody who would be arousing, but nothing came from it other than you end up having an interesting, fun night, a conversation, stuff. You never see them again, right? So to me, that would be a success, and only because everything starts initially as an attempt to socialize, and then through the socialization, try to determine whether or not that you there's a longer shelf life beyond the initial circumstances and when you met, right? So whether it was like, say, traditionally used to be bars and nightclubs and stuff and that sort of thing, gyms. Back in the day, I used to laugh because I used to refer to gyms as meat markets, right? So people would go there with the intention trying to actually meet somebody. And nowadays, what I find is that's kind of frowned on. People go to the gym because they're serious about going to the gym. But back in the 80s, when you went to the gym, you'd have people looking their best as though they were going out for an evening, like dressed like they're, looking that good while they're in gym apparel, right? And all for the purpose of attracting somebody, right? So again, you know, so this, to me, romantic love, of all the love that's available to us, is probably the one that's it's the most fun, but it's the least valuable. Maybe that's the best, good way to say it.
It's just the Kickstarter.
Yeah, it's for shits and giggles. It's for fun, and then in the course of having fun together, you might discover that there's potential for more. Right, but it may be all interactions should start in a frivolous kind of way. Maybe it should be just about how much arousal you can produce in someone or they can produce in you, and ultimately it's for a long-term relationship. But at the beginning, at the starting line, you're just trying to turn each other on, or end up turning each other off, right? Like, so.
Yeah, I figure for a lot of ladies, it's like elimination process.
I don't want to speak on behalf of the ladies because I'm not a lady, so I don't pretend to presume to know how they think.
Right.
But I find it super curious that the majority of women, especially in today's culture, regardless of how they actually appear, they all consider themselves tens, and that they're all, in terms of a mate, aspiring to a very particular type of mate. Somebody's tall, like in terms of like heterosexually, the women aspire to men who are tall, good looking, a good person, and also like career, or so that they have access to good, like lots of material resources. I'm like, in describing an individual like that, you're only describing a very, very small percentage of the men who are out there, right? So then you have the majority of women who are making themselves available to a small minority of men. Ladies, let me tell you, that small minority of men are not dumb. They'll take advantage of the fact that you're all drawn to them. So that means they get to cherry pick, and they casually choose sexual partners without any intention of them becoming long-term partners, because they know they can replace you easily. And in the pursuit of this small minority of men, you might be looking past somebody who's exactly what you need, but he doesn't meet all those metrics. Not tall, doesn't have great jobs, not making a ton of money, maybe not, super clever or super funny or whatever the metrics are, right? That you might inadvertently, you might be bypassing something that would meet all your needs and actually might love you for a lifetime, right? So I'm just putting that out there. Don't hate on me.
Well, it's not too far off from what I was going to say. Like, from what I can tell, or from what I see mostly, and from my experiences, like anecdotal experiences,
Right.
some from friends, there's like, it seems like a lot of men feel as though they have to prove themselves, whereas like for women, it's very much a selection process. And
Yeah.
if that's how it is, then maybe it's good. But I kind of find it funny, and you went directly to it right away. It's funny, we have like Tinder, like these things that are hyperinflating these egotistical values and stuff, like literal values.
Well, and so again, all that social media that's designed for coupling. So you mentioned Tinder, but like all of any kind of dating site or anything like that everyone's promoting an image that may very likely not be an accurate representation of who they are, because they're trying to idealize themselves to make them more appealing to prospective mates. So
For
and
sure.
and and it goes both ways. It's not It's not just women, it's men too. Everybody's a participant in it, right? And they're all just scrolling through. It's just endless faces, right? And they're all saying the same things, right? Like, oh, I'm a great guy, or I'm a great woman, or whatever. And you're going like, well, you haven't told me anything that
Right.
anyone else hasn't already expressed, right?
Yeah, it's funny though, because you're talking about like a meat market. We got like Uber Meats now. No, it's terrible. Well, it's not terrible. It is what it is.
Right. Well, it's interesting again how coupling has evolved. So this evolution in coupling, which is an extension of love, or this need to be loved, right? We've talked about this before many times. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you want to feel loved and you want to love, right? So that's a basic requirement. So what I find super curious then, this basic requirement, somebody's capitalized on it to exploit you for money, and if you have thousands and thousands of people on a site, and the site's even charging a small amount, they're making a fortune. And I know there's some sites where they're for free, and then advertisers pay for the site to function, right? But you know, I knew a guy his chief complaint was every time he would meet with somebody, and I'm not going to name the actual site or the person, but that every time that he would meet or agree to meet with somebody, they were never what they looked like in their picture. So the picture was always what they used to look like,
Yeah.
right? So it's kind of being dishonest to lure in a mate. I understand why somebody might do that, right? It's because it's already tough enough as it is. So then it makes you think like it's really shitty that it's been reduced to a pure selection process. It's like you're going through a basket, going which is the ripest or the best.
Yeah, it used to be. It used to be like simultaneously you're figuring out if she's like a stand-up lady, and if you're good enough for her, she'll be reviewing you. Now it's just like, oh, I'm gonna keep swiping on my phone, and then I'm gonna play the numbers game.
Yeah.
So the quality of the relationships, I'm gonna argue, is like way the hell down, because you're already getting people that think an app is gonna give them long-term romance.
Well, I think also the quality too is affected by the level of expectation that they have, right? So their biases that they project on the other person while they're courting, like while they're trying to get to a point where they've agreed now that they're in a relationship together, right? So just a curious little note. When I was your age, so when I was in my 20s, we used to always remark everybody who was around the same age. How is it that you would have these guys who are like gearheads and maybe not exactly the most attractive guy having beautiful partners, right? Because back then they took the time to get to know each other, and so somebody who was really, really attractive wasn't settling. They just found somebody that were their appearance wasn't the primary deciding factor on whether or not they're gonna be with them. The fact that like they might be really giving, a good person, and they're hardworking, so they have availability of resources, material resources. So you can see where that would make them attractive. But now all I hear, and again, all I hear when I talk to 20 somethings, everybody's looking for this thing, the male or female version of something that's almost unattainable. I don't know people who could meet that level of expectation that they've created. Like I go, so it's no wonder people are getting like cosmetic surgeries and doing all this stuff to try and meet that unrealistic expectation, right? So that's kind of where things are currently, which is again very, very, to me, is sad, right?
Well, yeah, it's performative and unnatural. Like it's downright lying at some points, because like you say, there's like the catfishing.
Yeah.
There's one photo you meet up with her person, she's like 2 feet tall. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, what are you doing?
Yeah, well, it goes both ways. Men are just as bad. They do the
Yeah.
same thing, right?
Yeah, I assume people start leaning towards the tendency of going, okay, I'm not going to provide anything terribly good. We're going to go to the park or go to like a simple date and then figure it out from there. Because it seems like people might not want to go spend a lot of money on somebody who's just in it for money.
Again, coupling at some point is eventually going to be about economics. So,
Right.
so on the surface, like they just want to know that like maybe that they got a good job or and their work steady. So then at least the implication is that there's some material resources to be had,
That's a
right?
good baseline to have.
Yeah.
Like, at least having a job, at least that. Like,
Yeah, then in terms of a metric, you go, it's not unreasonable. They work steady. That means they have a steady inflow of material resources, and the question just becomes like, how much and how much of it is available to them, right? So again, like I said, I find it super curious, and you shouldn't take my word for it either, right? I've never had what I would consider a successful relationship, and I was married for like 8 years, right? So I'm just somebody who's curious about this because my own experience has always ever been great romantic love, not so great like long-term love, right? I've had some successes, but if they eventually end, then how much of a success were they really, right? If anything, right? So, and again, not to get into the details of it because I don't want to share that much about myself with you. But the fact that my experience isn't exclusive to me, that it's a common experience, right?
it's definitely an interesting question because I'm thinking all relationships end at some point. There's
Yeah,
no.
even purely um, uh, platonic relationships, they experience ends. Like you have friendships that's all that your relationship is with any given with a say a particularly given person, and it comes to a close, right? Like that's uh, you know it's sad, but that's unfortunately the way of it, right? It doesn't always happen. There's a lot of people who have lifetime friendships, or they have lifetime. They couple with a person, and they genuinely, throughout the entire time they're together, they genuinely love them, right? And they're together for decades, not a single decade, but multiple decades, and they're happy to be in a relationship with them. So again, as a topic goes, I don't know that there's any one right or wrong way to look at it. We're just talking about it in its multifaceted kind of way that love presents and relationship and ultimately divorce and the opposite of fear, which may actually again exercise a great influence over people to such a degree that it kills the love that they have for each other. So to me, it's again, it's fascinating, this idea of coupling, particularly between men and women, because how do you do it in such a way that it has longevity, that it not only does it have longevity, but that it's a satisfying experience more often than not, so that when you reflect back on it, you go like, it was way more rewarding than it wasn't. It's gonna have it. Every relationship's gonna have its hard times and bumps in the road. But if you can characterize your time together as being mostly rewarding, mostly satisfying, think you're okay. Think you're ahead of the game, right? But I don't know a lot of people who are like that.
True. I was thinking, I'm not sure if there is an unsuccessful relationship because the relationship is to see, is this going to is it going to be, you know, you can either go, is it going to be what I need it to be, what I want it to be, whatever. But it seems like it's just
So
a trial.
okay, so then do you think that what you want it to be might contribute to the trial going poorly?
Yeah.
Because if you come into it not being open but saying, here, specifically I require this, and then individuals not being able to live up to that expectation, then then you end up being largely alone.
Oh yeah, I feel like that's probably the most common one. But even if you care so much for this individual and you want to help them all the time, that's going to be an issue too. Because like
Yeah, because
individuals,
now you've changed the nature of the relationship, so that now it's a dependency, it's codependent instead of it being interdependent.
right?
Which to me, I guess it might be an idealized way of looking at relationship, but isn't that what you want? That you're functionally each of you are capable of functioning entirely as a separate individual, and then you bring that capacity together so that now you mutually support each other. So I'll ask the question: is that unrealistic, right? Or is that the ideal? Is that the thing that you want to aspire to in the course of a relationship?
That certainly seems ideal because it's not like I can live through the perception of my partner. But if if these two people are able to work together better, if they're able to like disconnect, it gives them all the room to be individuals that might be burdened by like the ego of the relationship. Like, oh, one of us woke up a little tired, so one of us isn't so chipper, and that causes a problem for the other one because they're going, oh, why isn't my partner in a better mood? There's people are weird.
Yeah, 100%. So there, and so we talk about like being stable as an individual. I go, but if you're unstable and you're getting into a relationship with another unstable person, and what I mean by that is like it's not that they're not functional, that they're not clever, and can't exercise intelligence. It's just that they're counterintuitive. So all they do is actually feed into more downward spirals, right? So then the relationship is basically like an unpleasant roller coaster ride. Like it's not thrilling. They just go through these highs and bottom out, and highs and bottom out, and usually intense emotions, like so some anger may come out, frustration, resentment. So again, when you say people are fucking weird, they're fucking weird. And then to make it all the more weird, if they're unstable individuals getting involved, then that'll characterize the nature of the relationship. It'll be unstable.
I 100% agree. Like, I don't think everybody is stable. I wouldn't consider anybody stable.
No, but again, within a relative and reasonable kind of way. That like, I'm not expecting perfection from anyone. I expect people to be loaded with idiosyncrasies.
No, it's obvious that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Ah, shit, what was I going to say?
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to break your concentration.
I was something along the lines of like the cooperation seems to be most beneficial when the inconsistencies in the individual, when that pops up, you journey alone, then you come back to the pack or to the
pair, right? Yeah, I agree. I think so. What really is required then is before you're going to enter into a relationship with somebody for the express purposes of a long-term goal, that you're required to do a lot of personal work.
I think
right? Well, yeah, it doesn't stop once you couple, but I think that you have to be well on the way to self-realization. And then when you enter a relationship and the two of you are well on your way, then I think then what you end up having is a greater chances of success, like long-term success as a couple.
For sure, yeah.
Right? But that's because you, as a person, you made it your goal to like not just to realize yourself, but stabilize yourself as much as humanly possible. Right?
Yeah, like it definitely doesn't make sense. Like, oh, I'm gonna go in a relationship. She's gonna help me feel better. It's like that's so stupid.
Or that they expect the other person to somehow make up the deficit in their own shortcomings. That somehow they'll help to draw out the better part of them. It's like that's not their job. If you're putting that on your partner, now you've created an unnatural expectation or unrealistic expectation on your partner. And ultimately it's something that it's supposed to be your job to realize yourself, to come into your own, right? Not put it on the other person and then get pissed because one, you either come up short or you start demonstrating inexcusable behavior, but you put it on them, like that it's not your fault. Why didn't you tell me I did? Like,
Yeah.
it's this weird, like you said it. It's how fucking weird we are when we start having these intimate, trusting, personal relationships, and that how they end up kind of having their own strange dynamics, right? And what I don't hear is a lot of couples talking about that when when something like that occurs, that they, hey, we should probably address this.
Oh, you mean communication's an important skill? Holy! All right, let me write this down. Okay.
Well,
But nobody does it.
Well, because everybody, I think, again, walks into it with a lot of assumptions. You're just going to do this, and it'll all work out. Let me ask you: when does it ever work out in the way that you imagined that it was going to, other than in a small minority of cases? But for the majority of us, we're what you can fairly expect to do is to struggle.
Oh
Right?
yeah. The best thing you can do, in my opinion, from my experiences, if you're struggling, if you're having these feelings and they're not great and they can affect your ego and your relationship, tell them. Just go, hey, I feel like shit. I've been depressed for a week.
Yeah, man. But fear. This is okay. So this is why I brought fear as part of the conversation. I think a lot of us stifle that out of fear of rejection and that their partner won't love them anymore. So then instead of admitting to weakness, just hide the weakness, right? Because again, what they fear is the partner leaving. And the irony is that because they're stifling the fear and they're not expressing it and they're not communicative with the other parties so that they can sort of like maybe neutralize that fear, that so you don't have to continue experiencing it, that the fear is the thing that is the straw that breaks the camel's back, that does in your relationship, right?
That's a weird thing to address. It's like a double-edged sword. You're like, oh, this person, the relationship, like I have to treat it as if it's extremely important. Although what you feel is like, oh, it's the utmost important. But if you're doing that, you're also hindering the relationship, putting expectations on. It's like it's like trying to balance on a boogie board. You're like really in for a ride if it's such a strong wave, you know.
Right. Okay, so running with the analogy, because you started it initially like a double-edged sword, and then the boogie board as a reflection of like how much work it is to maintain the balance, so you don't go flying off the board. Using the sword analogy, or that that it's double-edged, then much like a sword, for the sword not to threaten the person who's using it, they're required to develop skills so that now the sword is just an extension of them and they don't have to fear either side. Doesn't matter that both sides are sharp. But we don't practice developing skills, relationship skills, so that we can have good, healthy relationships. And that doesn't mean that they're going to be free from error, free from failure, but that you can maybe have a more balanced kind of interaction with another person, and again, therefore a healthy relationship. So you're able to address your own idiosyncrasies, each other's, and you that's where you might help each other along, because they become the perfect sounding board. Or you hide it from them from fear of being seen as being weaker, or somehow that it make you less appealing, and then ultimately they're going to end up leaving you. So
I mean, out of that insecurity, you're most likely, I'm thinking like average person that I met, you're most likely going to become resentful if you're already having these feelings of insecurity, because
you're feeling inadequate, that you can't, like, that your insecurities revolve around the fact that you can't meet those expectations. So that feeling of inadequacy, or the sense of that somehow you're inadequate as a potential mate. Wonder how much that contributes to the downfall of relationships,
Yeah,
right?
because people double down. They go like, oh, I noticed this issue, so I'm either gonna criticize that issue or I'm gonna double down and then
Not say anything, and
right.
then hope it works itself out. And let me ask you, how often in the experience of your life, without addressing problems, do they resolve themselves? Like maybe never.
I think best case scenario, you say, hey, this is something that's so bad that I'm willing to end the relationship now to preserve this not happening. Like
Uh,
it's circumstantial, but
of course, but you bring up an interesting point. So say you're in, it's not like a lifetime relationship, but you're in like a 10-year relationship, and that it's just not living up to what you want anymore. And it's not just you that they might be feeling it, or they may not be feeling it, but you are genuinely feeling it. You would think then here that would be a good time to have that conversation then. And then if the conclusion is at the end of the conversation that what would best serve you both is you part company, instead of being hostile and hating on each other, you could express gratitude for the years that were good and go, hey, I really am grateful for, how good it was when it was good. But it's kind of, as probably because of negligence on one or both parties, that it ends up dying like this slow, painful death. But you could preserve the best parts of that relationship. You go, here, like I was really grateful to have the capacity, the ability to feel that kind of love for somebody, and then the realization that is now you need to move on, like and potentially eventually move on to another relationship, and then you wish each other the best of luck, and then you find a way to amicably part company. So usually that doesn't go very well or easy, particularly in a society where it favors personal gain.
yeah.
Right. So, but it's up to the individuals involved, that for them to sort of hear, you recognize that it wasn't entirely shitty. I think the worst thing would be realizing that ultimately that it was not a good relationship right from the start.
Oh yeah.
But even in that realization, it gives you now the ability to hear, like, then it's clear we should part company now, right? It's time for us to both to move on to hopefully something better, right? Something that would bring us more of what we wanted initially from our relationship, which, like I said, it should provide you with a sense of reward and a sense of satisfaction, and that it consistently, more often than not, those are the experiences within the relationship, right? If they're not, then here's a fair question: why are you still together? And there's lots of people who stay together and are not in love. They stay together. They'll offer up. They'll excuse the reasons for staying together in a loveless relationship because of children, for the benefit of the children. Some will do it for the most practical reasons. They're a great provider, have a great lifestyle, and I'm not prepared to reduce my lifestyle. So I'll stay in this loveless relationship just so I can enjoy the lifestyle that I've become accustomed to. And for people who would look down on that, I go, it might be really superficial, but is it any less valid a reason for staying in a relationship? Like, especially if, like, they may not love them, but they don't hate them, or they don't hate each other. It's just that they're just kind of, it's more like being roommates now. So what? Like, is that for some, they can't envision being in a relationship like that. But again, like, to me, I don't see the fault in people choosing to do that. I think that if you then, as a result of that, start having extracurricular affairs, then you might, like, here, then maybe you're not just roommates. They're like, It's unfulfilling, and because you need to go outside the relationship for sex. You know how much sex kills relationships, or the lack of it. So again, it can be contributing factor. So there's so much at play in the way we interact, like that. It
Yeah.
gives you, to even think about it gives you a headache, because you go like, it's just so much to consider.
Yeah, because a lot of like all of it is nearly all of it is circumstantial. Because you're talking about like, oh, basically roommates, and I'm thinking, as much as I care for the person I'm seeing, if it turns into a long term thing, ideally, like I want to spend most of my time being an individual. The fact that I'm going to spend 30% of my time with them out of work, it's like okay, that's fine. But like most people, I figure like being individuals if they're very much like they have to be working on something, they can't sit still. But depending on temperament, of course, it's like that could be good or bad for the wife.
Or the relationship, sure.
Yeah, because I could see a lifestyle where a lady might like having like a roommate husband. Like the love is still there. It's just that she understands she has like 80 years to fulfill the rest of her life. She's gonna have like uh, hours out of every single day with her partner. So it's like she can dedicate herself to herself, and then her secondary obligation is to like the family or the husband. Or
Okay, so maybe then the ultimate balance then is honoring yourself and honoring your partner and the relationship. So that's what you're juggling. So to try and find enough time to be able to service your own interests, the interests of the relationship, and the interests of your partner, and everybody's on board. It's mutual. So then that might contribute to success. So again, it doesn't have to look any particular way. It just has to meet those criteria,
right,
right?
like saying roommate makes it sound dispassionate, but at
Well,
the same time,
again, you might just get to a point where like you've been together for 30 years. You go like, I'm not super passionate about them, but it doesn't mean that you don't enjoy like intimacy with each other. It just means that it's not like you've been so together for so long that it's not a priority in the way that you relate to one another.
yeah, in my mind, if it's like it's been years, you spend 3 hours a day together, that's
Good enough.
supper. Yeah, that that's pretty good. If there has to be changes, it's all conditional.
Right, of course. Again, I don't, I try to avoid describing specifically what it is. Instead, I think about it in terms of what has to occur within the context of the relationship, and then the specific details of what that might be. You have the freedom as individuals to interpret that however you want, so long as it meets that criteria, right?
Do you think it's realistic that people should ask their partners to set expectations on them? Like, if I'm saying to my partner, look, I know I have this issue, I'm not studying, this subject enough. Like, could you put a criteria on me that's reasonable?
No, I don't know that. I don't know exactly how that would work. I don't see that as being really productive, because now you're putting the emphasis on the other person. Now, if you're referring to like who's doing the dishes and who's cooking dinner,
Oh, that's something that's manageable between the two.
right?
Yeah.
But it can be a bone of contention. Why do you leave the toilet seat up every time you go to the bathroom? Why do you leave? Why don't you put the cap on the tube of toothpaste every time you use it? Like you sit there and go like, this kind of incidental, but it's like a grain of sand. Eventually, it can chafe you to the point where now it's such a potent irritant. You're in trouble, right?
Oh, so it would benefit the relationship just being able to go in the room and say, "Hey, you did this, fuck off," and then they go, "Oh, I did do that."
Yeah, and
Okay.
and then maybe try to exercise enough forethought that like, oh, when you finish in the bathroom, you lower the seat. When you finish using the toothpaste, you put the tube on. If you can't do that, then it's clear. Then you need to say something to them, particularly if it's become a requirement because it's so irritating, right? Or you find somebody who doesn't give a shit about those things,
Right.
right? Like whatever the irritant is, that they just don't do it, right? So, but that means learning the nuances of another person, and then for them to learn the nuances of you, so that and when they discover that those little specific details, that they're not irritating, right? They're like, no, it's totally cool, I get it.
That's when it becomes like quirky.
Well, it's whatever. It's gonna, I don't, like I said, I don't think there's a one way to look at it to say it's a success because of this.
Right, that's fair, because it's like relationship economics.
Yeah, and so I think, and again, it requires communication, that you're willing to take the time out to talk to each other in a way like where you go, it gives you the ability to reflect on your concerns about the way simple shit that you do in the context of sharing space, right? And the things you got away with when you were living with roommates and you guys were like filthy animals and leaving shit all over the place. That's okay when you're just roommates and you're coming up on your own. It makes you a fucking slob if you're 50 and you're still doing it,
Yeah.
right? And it can kill your relationship, right? So some kind of decorum, where you're modest and you conduct yourself in such a way that you're considerate of the fact that you're not living alone, that you're sharing the space with somebody, and that you need that anytime you do anything, you not only have to consider how much, like, especially if it's incidental to you, how much it might impact the other person. Like, so, and then the question becomes, is that even realistic? If it's unrealistic for you individually, I think it might be different from person to person. But if it's unrealistic for you, like that you can't do that, you're in the relationship with the wrong person. You need to find somebody then who that would be acceptable, right?
Right, like, because there's some stuff that, like, happens in, there's no nice way to put it, so I'll just say, like, one thing the girl I'm seeing does, she'll do, like, a customer voice, and that bugs the hell out of me. But it's acceptable, you know? Whereas if somebody's rolling their eyes at me, and it's like, we're supposed to be grateful for each other, totally different scenario.
Yeah, I get it. Like, so the little idiosyncrasies, some of them shouldn't be worth you saying anything.
Right.
Right? Some of them you just be like, yeah, it's just the way they are. Does it really grate on you? No. Well, then why even say anything?
Right.
The only time then you're required to say something is if there's an effect, and a not positive one either. So the positive ones, it's easy to be cool with them, but the ones that aren't so positive, you have to decide: are you cool with that, or are you not cool with that? If you're not cool with that, here's your opportunity to say something, and then in the discourse, if you discover that they're like never going to change that, that's an answer, and it should inform a decision. That maybe, maybe then it's time for me to find somebody who doesn't do that. Really.
Right, it really puts things into perspective. Like, my example is eye rolling, that's totally not okay. Whereas, like, customer voice, as annoying as I might find it, it's like, it's a little bit of time out of the day. Who cares?
Yeah, it's not it's don't make anthills into mountains.
If
right?
she's trying to convert you, then maybe.
No, then that you're radically different. Okay, so in terms of relationship and stuff like that, that was really a super deep dive. But I still want to talk about aspects of love, and I want to talk about passionate love for a moment. So it's usually something that people experience at the start of relationships, and I've often heard it referred to as the honeymoon phase of a relationship. Like, so once you get past that point where now you're both in agreement that you're in a exclusive relationship, then two things happen. You become completely amorous towards each other, and then sex becomes a big part of the experience, right? Because it's the honeymoon phase. It's you reveling in the relationship, and the highest expression of that is engaging in sex, right? So again, it's an intense emotion towards the other people that's driven by strong sexual attraction. So can you have that as your relationship matures out?
I think so.
I think you can too, but I think timing becomes the big issue, right? Because you might be feeling it, but they're not. So you got to try and find a way to sort of create the right environment or atmosphere for it. So passionate love, I think you can have maybe for the entire duration of a relationship, but you you've got to establish a procedure or a way that you go about doing it so that you can both be on board at the same time, instead of one of you being totally into it and the other one not being into it, but going, okay, just for the sake of like, they're going to comply. And I'm going, kind of a really, really rotten way to engage in sex, right? Like you should both be completely on board and good to go, right?
Split a blue pill and put it in the tea. It's like, oh, it's lunch time for tea.
Again, whatever floats your boat.
No, that's not okay. Don't do that.
You heard the man. Don't do that. It's bad.
Maybe illegal.
Okay, that was funny. I would like to talk, because I think passionate love is kind of self-explanatory,
Okay.
and it doesn't need a huge dive beyond what we've already said. But compassionate love, on the other hand, is one of those things that it's that part of love where you express a genuine feeling for another person, but from the perspective of like caring and nurturing, right? Where you're supportive. I think that's what compassionate love is. So that's not exclusive to intimate, trusting, personal relationships.
Right.
You can have compassionate love in platonic relationships and essentially relationships with perfect strangers. There's no reason why that it couldn't exist. But again, you have to be careful, because if you're completely compassionate in the expression of love, predators would absolutely take advantage of somebody who's that giving, and particularly if they're naive, then it's just a recipe for disaster. So compassionate love has to be balanced with wisdom. But if you have compassionate love and wisdom, I think that in that expression, then what you have is the highest possibly expression of love, where it's just you genuinely care for the health and well-being of others, right? That's where random acts of kindness come from. We're on the verge of crossing over from 2024 to 2025, and consistently for like 6,000 years, we have ongoing random acts of violence and hatred. People perpetrate them all the time against one another. Now, people are usually caring and compassionate towards their own family members, but I like the idea that people could demonstrate random acts of kindness as an expression of compassion and love. You don't need to know the person. You don't need to be aware of any specific details of them. You just have to be giving of yourself, and it's not like at the expense of yourself. You're not giving and where it costs you your integrity, right? Or it's you give what you can afford to give. So you just simply give of yourself. I think compassionate love is what allows for us to be able to do that. So as much as our history is replete with random acts of chaos and violence and hatred, it's also and it's maybe not nearly as well acknowledged or realized, but the people are not only capable of, but often, commit random acts of kindness, and that you should that's how you should treat life. Like I don't really live by a ton of rules or guidelines, but the one that always is reoccurring for me is, if you treat me good, I will treat you better.
Pretty easy rule of thumb.
And treat me poorly and I just leave. I shouldn't have to explain, right? So if I've left, it's because you thought that you were more than within your right to behave in a shitty way or to do something random, maybe not necessarily overtly violent, but in a dismissive kind of way or a way where it shows complete disrespect for me. I'm not staying around so that what you can continue to disrespect me. I'm gone. But treat me good, and I will find a way to treat you better. So talk about a simple guideline to way in living your life. And if everybody adopted it, you might not have to fear people snatching you off the street or people gunning other people down in the streets. The kind of stuff that you go, it's just, to me, it's just ridiculous, right? And there's no need for it. But how often do you have conversations with anybody where the topic of conversation is compassion, right? Like most people, it's very often dismissed as being a sign of weakness. And I would argue that your ability to be compassionate and to demonstrate acts of kindness demonstrates the highest strength, right? That only the strong can do that. The weak are the ones that exploit and take advantage of others because they're driven by their emotions, they're driven by the random thought generator, their ego, and that's what allows for them to commit random acts of violence and hatred. Right? So that's somebody who's unstable and therefore weak. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine.
You got something to say?
I agree with you. I even had an experience where I was treated strangely because I was doing a random act of kindness. The reaction I got was not quite like disgust, but more like unfamiliarity and like.
Yeah, because nobody, again, we don't talk about it, and we certainly don't do it to each other.
Like we open a door, but that's
opening a door. I mean, it's a small act. Don't get me wrong, and you know, if it's a mother with a small child and in one arm and a bag in the other, that's actually that constitutes an act of kindness, right? You're helping them out. But again, you don't do it for a reward. You don't take a picture of yourself doing it and post it to social media. Right?
I've seen somebody. This was a video. She was recording herself giving out food to like one homeless guy.
Yeah, that to me, that's again, it's dishonest. It's disingenuous, right? An honest expression of kindness doesn't require any kind of acknowledgement or reward for the person committing the act of kindness or compassion. So I think, again, compassionate love is highly underrated, and it's the kind of thing that's worthy of us engaging in conversation, and not to express like, here, I did this, like, should treat me with high regard. I don't mean like that. I mean for us to like talk about defining what that constitutes compassionate love. How could you conduct yourself from day to day using that as a cornerstone in the way that you behave, right? Instead of being a competitor and that everything and everyone there is there for you to exploit for your own gain and advantage, because compassionate love's contrary to that.
Right. I figure it would be something like hug every dog you go across, but at the same time, don't hug it to death.
I don't hug dogs. I love dogs, but I don't go out of my way to hug dogs. There's only one dog I hug. That's my brother's dog because I love the dog to death. But you know, I like petting other dogs, but I don't like, you know, oh, your dog's so beautiful. I love to hug the dog.
I wouldn't recommend that. I'm just saying, yeah. That'd be funny. Oh, I love your dog. Yeah, it bites.
I thought you said your dog doesn't bite. It's not my dog.
I just found this one.
So you can see it then, like, it's an attitude that informs behavior, right? Like our behaviors, where you can be cognizant of other people, and have an awareness of them, and then to act in a small way that somehow alleviates something that they're going through or experiencing, and you happen to be privy to it, you get to see it, and then all again, like you were saying, you just holding open the door, but it can make all the difference. All right, you don't have to smile at everyone you meet, not like that, not where you're walking through, we're stupidly happy. That's not required. But you see somebody in the middle of thing, get the door for them, that you could do something to, like, to just help them out. And nothing specific comes to mind, but you would know and recognize it, the circumstances, when you encounter them. You'd see here, all it would require to do this one thing, and it would make a difference for that person who's doing something right now. Go over and and lend a hand. That's it. And it makes the difference. It makes their day. Suddenly they're going, oh, the world's not such a shitty place. That's the other thing that nobody talks about: compassionate love, or random acts of kindness. They're infectious. So it's like tipping over a domino. So you do that for somebody, and then they may decide that they want to pay that forward, right? Because somebody did a kindness to them, so they do a kindness for someone else. It would be like, you're standing in line and you buy yourself a coffee, and you pay for the person behind you for their coffee, and because you're compelled by something about them. So, and I'm not talking about like you trying to use it as a way to, to get to meet them. I mean that you can see they're kind of distraught, and you go like, the act of buying them a cup of coffee for what it would suddenly might change their whole attitude towards the day.
Yeah, well, the guy looks like shit. He's all muddy. His shoes obviously shows he works like in hard labor. Buy him a coffee. He goes, "Oh, fucking thank you, man. I ran out of smokes today. You don't know how hard it's been."
Yeah, whatever the circumstances, and like I said, we can't outline them specifically now,
right?
But you'd know it when you had encountered it. If you're paying attention, you're in the moment, you would see it. So if we could do that, if we would behave like that, then you might see like a much more kinder society. That's all I'm saying.
I think people would realize, like, it's weird. You get gratitude from sharing, and from sharing with people that genuinely need it.
Right.
It's weird.
Well, but they don't have to be. They don't have to be homeless and destitute.
Right.
They could just be someone who's just having a shit day.
Right.
And then this one thing you do suddenly alleviates how shitty the day is for them, and it's no longer a shitty day. Right? You've given them a catalyst to allow for them to go like, hey man, thanks so much. It's like, that's cool, right? It just made me feel good.
It's kind of funny. You think about it. That seems like one of the easiest ways to feel more like competent. You're just doing small things that show like thoughtfulness.
Yeah. So another way of saying that, being thoughtful is also being mindful. But again, it's interchangeable with paying attention. If you're paying attention, you'll see those moments, and then you can act in those moments, and you can make all the difference in someone's day. Right? And if we did that for each other, then it's kind of lifting each other up.
Oh, the worst excuse somebody could have to not do this would be like, oh, there's a bunch of people watching, I want to be weird and just like do something against the social norm. No. The whole point is to do something that's not the same as everybody else. You do something that's uniquely what's right in the moment.
Yeah, often people will excuse like doing something because they'll be surrounded by other people. So for them, the conclusion they'll reach is somebody will do something, when they are the somebody who should be doing something. But it's because they're disassociated with what's going on, because the feeling is that there are others who will take care of it, when they can be that other, right? So it just makes you, like, to me, I go, when we gauge in these conversations, you see the obviousness of this, and I can't imagine a lot of people taking issue with this, or seeing fault in the line of reasoning, and yet still it's not the way that we commonly conduct ourselves. And if we did, again, it'd be a small, go a long way to it's a small thing that could potentially lift somebody up from a bad day to a good day, turn it all around for them. And then if they recognize that somebody's done that for them, then now they have this sense of obligation that by the end of the day, now I got to do the same thing for somebody else.
I know people don't like to be like the nail that's sticking up, because I guess they figure, oh, if I do something good, people are gonna see I'm a target, But it just goes to show how easy it is to help anybody with like just small things throughout the day.
Yeah. Then it again, like I understand the concern because people don't want to be victimized, but my thinking is you put yourself out there right up until someone steps on you. And then if you can sort them out then and there, you do that. If you can't, you address your wounds, and then you put yourself back out there, right? You don't stop doing it because somebody takes advantage of you. Uh, the idea is to have enough wherewithal, or to be present or thoughtful or mindful enough that you can see it coming and you're able to avoid it. But that's not always the case. Sometimes it happens. So if they step on you, okay, let them step on you, deal with it, and then get your ass back out there and keep being giving of yourself, right? That don't allow for one shitty act now to completely undo you. You don't have to be undone by that stuff.
In my experience, it's a lot easier when you have like so many people who believe in genuinely doing the right thing. That when there's something wrong going on, somebody's trying to like overstep. There's like an even-handed ass beating they get. It's not like a literal beating, but it's more like, hey, we all saw you do that thing. We all know you're this type of person. Now you have to live with the consequences of being known to be what you are.
So then guilt and regret could act to get them to undo that like negative behavior. Like again, I don't mean to suggest that because you experience guilt and regret that you suddenly self-correct immediately.
Right.
But it does provide the opportunity for that. And here's the beautiful thing. We're designed to learn. So maybe that's the form that the learning has to take. And then as a result of that, then the person changes. So then if they needed to step on me, I'm okay with bearing the weight if the end result is that they actually turn around.
Right, because I think I've heard there's a difference between guilt and shame. Shame is, the feeling. Guilt is whereas it's like there was something bad done. You should feel shame because you are guilty.
Yeah.
But I feel like vast majority of people on their own do this. Like they just self-correct. They think about it. Maybe they're wrong in their self-correction,
but at least they're making the effort to try and like stem more negative behavior that they might present as.
That's a valuable thing, especially for people who are looking like, hey, that person's in a negative feedback loop. Like either we help them or we don't help them because they're one of those people that drown and drag people with them.
Yeah. Again, those are the risks of it, and you have to have an awareness enough to you should throw everyone a lifeline. But if they don't have the good sense to grab the lifeline, that's not your problem. You did what you could do. You're not required to go above and beyond. You don't wear a cape, you don't fly, you can't see through walls, you don't have super strength, so you're not fucking saving nobody. The only person you're capable of actually doing that for is yourself. But then you can extend a hand of kindness to everyone, to anything, more than capable of. And you don't need a cape, and you don't need to be able to fly, you don't need to be able to do any of that shit to be kind, right? So So I don't know how much you cultivate compassionate love, but the ability to be compassionate, uh, you could argue, is the greatest love, right? So now I want to get on to an interesting form of love that to me is comparable to compassionate love, and that's unconditional love. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I've heard of it.
Okay, so I'm just going to read the definition I have for unconditional love. Simply put, is love without strings or attachment, love you offer freely with no expectations, not based on whether someone can do something for you. It's simply love for others and wanting nothing in return other than their happiness, their joy, or for them to feel a sense of reward and satisfaction. It brings to mind the love of parents for their own children. I would go so far as to argue that if you want unconditional love, I don't think it's realistic between two adults. I think it's not only mandatory, but a part of every parent-child relationship. The parents should absolutely unconditionally love their children, but the children shouldn't unconditionally love the parents. They want unconditional love, let them grow, mature, and create a family of their own, and then they can experience unconditional love through loving their children. I think, and again, since what we're doing is trying to define this multifaceted thing and associated elements and how it impacts relationships, uh, to me, unconditional love, uh, again, is something equal to compassionate love, but in its own, I don't know how much of a distinction there is between it, but if your expectation is to have other adults love you unconditionally, I think you may be erroneous. I think that you should enter love relationships with adults completely conditional. That the relationship only works so long as it meets remember that criteria we talked about earlier, right? So long as it meets that, otherwise then then maybe then you might consider leaving the relationship, right? Dogs and cats probably love their owners unconditionally. That it's a purest, genuine form of love for someone. But I think it's unrealistic to expect that same kind of level of devotion and affection from another adult.
I would agree. The only real way I could see unconditional love being like a beneficial thing is like as we grow biologically, our ancestors had to take care of their descendants. So they had to have this unconditional love. So no matter what was going on, they they would prioritize those offspring.
Right, because that's how they guarantee the future.
I don't see it happening in any sort of other relationship, even in a relationship where it's like a man and a wife.
Yeah, I would argue that that's a place where the love that they have or share should be entirely conditional, right? That that they should meet these very specific and basic requirements, and in failing to do that, then maybe it's a loveless arrangement, and then you have to then act based on that insight, right? But I don't have this diluted kind of expectation of unconditional love. I have a mother who's 80 years old and has ailing health, and the same. It's funny, at this stage of her life, which is late in life, I feel like unconditional love for her. Like I just accept her for who she is, and she's struggling with her health and struggling with her emotions. So I feel a sense of obligation then to make myself available to her as much as humanly possible. Again, without exploiting myself to meet that, right? And fortunately, it's that the arrangement isn't like that. So I look after her, I take care of her, and I do it in the same way that I would look after and take care of my kids, right? So it might be the only time that you might experience unconditional love for another adult. But I don't, I'm her child, so she might love me unconditionally, but I don't get the sense of that. I get the sense that she loves her grandchildren completely unconditionally.
Maybe it's something reserved for like age group.
Maybe, I don't know, but in terms of defining unconditional love and the how and why of unconditional love, like I said, I see it as the kind of thing that parents should experience towards their children, right? And then allow the unconditional love to inform your behaviors.
It's interesting that you feel it towards um, your mom.
Well,
Figure,
but it might have a lot to do with the fact that she's got alien, like she's very sickly, ailing health, and
yeah.
and so I feel for her. I sympathize and I empathize for what she's going through.
Well, what I was thinking is like maybe part of this unconditional love is because of, like you say, these factors are they're kind of kicking you into like the paternal role, where it's like, wait a minute, I got a baby to take care of right now. Like I need
Well,
to do
that
this.
again, she's mobile. She's able to do things for herself, but again, the quality of her life isn't exactly the greatest, right? So maybe some could, I guess, accuse me of guilt because I feel good, and she's feeling bad, so I feel obligated to try and make her elevate her quality of life or make her feel better. And at the end of the day, I just love my mom because she's my mom, right? My dad died 6 years ago, and here's the strange thing: he's been gone for a long time. I still feel the love for him that I had when he was alive, right? And I was fortunate because I ended up having a really great relationship with my dad, and it wasn't always that way, right? But I have like a strong affection for him, and even though he's no longer here, uh, that feeling that doesn't go away. I still carry that feeling. So and it enriches me because I know that I'm capable of having love for others, right? And it might be compassionate love, but it's certainly maybe not unconditional love, right? It's just it's compassionate. I feel for them. I feel for their plight, right? So then I allow for it to inform my behavior, and then I behave accordingly, right?
Well, it definitely seems like there's a systematic, not way to govern like gratitude, but it seems like because of our biology, because of this and that social circumstance, like people who tend to take your perspectives, like like you know, like you have the philosophy, it's like cause no shit, or
Yeah, do no harm, take no shit.
yeah, it's essentially that, but it drives. It's an overdrive of personal drives, like this non-egotistical, but more like connected to this whole like sense of gratitude, the sense of love, the greater.
To me, it's more about acting in a correct way, reflecting the moment that you're in. Does that make sense? What I just said? That
It's unemotional, but
yeah,
the outcome is like you're doing the most.
emotional or most compassionate thing you could do.
Yeah,
Right? That's the end result. But I'm not tied to it. I don't have a feeling about it. I do it because I have such enough sense of presence that because I'm there in that moment, and somebody requires, in this case being my mother, or when my children were small, to be sensitive to their needs enough that you just simply act and meet those needs. And I don't wait for somebody else to do it. I go, you're there. It's your responsibility. because of the fact that you're there. And I don't take none of this shit personally. Like, you don't look at it in a personal kind of way. It has nothing to do with fucking you. It has everything to do with the fact that you're there. And if you're waiting for someone else to do it, that's a disillusionment of responsibility. That you somehow, it's not your responsibility. Somebody else will take care of it. And I'm like, wrong thinking, right?
That makes sense, because like you're approaching it the right way, whereas somebody else approaches it the wrong way. They'll still go
right or wrong, kind of super subjective. But yes, like for the sake of language, because we don't have other words to sort of summarize what we're talking about, it's fair and accurate to use right and wrong.
If they like approach it in the wrong way, meaning like the outcome is obviously not going to be an even-handed approach. The outcome's going to be, hey, you had too much ego, you wanted a good thing to happen, but you pushed, you stressed, you did the bad thing to...
So the end result was actually not something beneficial.
Yeah,
to be of benefit, right? And if the end result is that you act from wrong thinking, then you're a hindrance, not a benefit, right?
Yeah, because it has to be from like, I don't know if you would call it like the flow state, but it's like that emotional...
Sure.
It's just, this makes sense. I don't have to think about it. It just happens.
Yeah, I would agree. You could summarize it that kind of being present is in flow. You're in the flow. There's nothing distracting you. You're completely here and now. Right? Well, that's the flow state. Right? And which we've discussed at length. We'll do another episode on the flow state, but purely on that state of mind. Now I want to get on to a really super interesting form of love that, again, most people, when you say it, it's a bit awkward and might even induce some ridicule. And it's when people start talking about self-love. Right? So it's defined as the appreciation for oneself, taking actions to realize physical, psychological, mental, and spiritual growth and development. Right? So having a high regard for oneself and one's well-being, taking care of personal needs and requirements while not sacrificing your health, wealth, or well-being to meet the expectations of others. Right? So it's, again, that balanced place where you don't see yourself as being more important than others, but you're not less important either. Right? So self-love is the heart of quality, heart of balance. You can only be balanced because you already, you don't hold yourself in high regard. You just, that you care enough about yourself that you will act in a way that reflects that self-care in others. So you love yourself because you see the worth and value in others, that they're worth loving, and you give of yourself, right? But not to the point where now you're exploiting yourself, right? That's key. So self-love is this where you're genuinely okay with who you are. You're satisfied by who you are. But it's not to say that you don't that as an individual you don't aspire to realize yourself more fully, because no matter where you are, you can always realize more of the potential that you have. So self-love equates to not only balance, but the desire to realize one's own self, right? That you're the highest expression of who you can be, right? And it's driven by that, because you give a shit enough about yourself to go, I'm worth the effort I'm going to put in to realizing my potential. So to me, that's how I would define self-love. So you can take from that what you will. Agree, disagree, don't care.
Don't care. It definitely seems like people have to have that kind of balanced approach. You can't tyrannize yourself, but you can't baby yourself either.
100%. But very commonly, it's what people do, right? So and again, largely because I think that this kind of conversation, or particularly topic of self-love, that we don't actually try to define it or get to some level of understanding of it where now you integrate it in the way you live your life, right? That it's applicable. Self-love's not this, lofty notion or idea. It's you giving a shit about you, right? And you go, here, I'm worth all the effort I'm going to put in into realizing myself, and wherever I am, I'm worthy of love, and I love who I am, but still with the aspirations to even greater heights of self-expression, like in terms of who you are. That's real love of self.
Yeah, you want to allow yourself to be stagnant if you love yourself. You
Right.
go, hey, there's adventure out there. Let's go.
Let's live. Let's live. So again, I think self-love's something underrated, and largely people don't talk about. And now you can find whatever technical term you want for whatever it might be, but for the sake of like ease of understanding, everybody can understand this idea of like it's self-respect, right? That you can't have respect for others and you can't love others until you're capable of respecting yourself and loving yourself. So then once you're able to do that, now you have the capacity to do that for somebody else.
It definitely would help you appreciate the effort people put into their work. Because, you spend all day to get $1, you find out how much $1's worth.
Yeah, 100%. Right? So again, those are things that the understanding of that, you achieve it through self-respect. Right? Which, again, you could use that interchangeably with self-love.
I think you're right, because I see like some of the most bitter people, they're typically really terrible to themselves too.
Yeah, they're horrible to themselves. The first, well, think about, you want a great example of what we're talking about? Think about the climb and mental health issues and how much of that might come from a skewed perspective of themselves, right?
Oh,
and their emotions basically running rampant all over them, and them completely subservient to the random thought generator that is a part of their psychology and biology. That eventually it turns into self-loathing, and then instead of getting angry and raging, say outwardly, they internalize it, and then all it can make them is bitter and sad. So for those who aren't suffering from a chemical deficit in the way that their nervous system and brain functions, they're just overwhelmed by themselves and the inadequacies of their own life. Like, here, this could be a way to look at yourself slightly differently. But we've talked to that at length in terms of what's required for an individual to work towards self-realization. And since we are at the door of self-realization or self-actualization, I think that Maslow's ultimate expression of the individual, which is self-actualization, goes hand in hand with self-respect or self-love. I think that they're critical components to it, right? So, and again, just to define it really quickly, self-actualization is a process of realizing the fullest potential of any one individual through personal growth, creativity, self-fulfillment, development of mind, body, and spirit. So I don't know that we need to get into the nitty-gritty of that, but you can see the inherent value then in coupling self-love or self-respect and self-actualization. I would even go so far as to say that you can't self-actualize until you've accepted yourself, which you could see self-love as being surrender to self, or the ultimate acceptance of yourself, right?
112%. You gotta think like, how are you gonna do any actualizations without first realizing what that action did was important and valuable, because you are important and valuable.
Right.
And the growth of that is important and valuable.
Right. So that for anybody listening to this, you are fucking worthy. Okay? But
you're not worthy.
But It requires effort and work, right? That worthiness is inherent in what you are. You come into the world and you have value. But to amplify that value and that worthiness is you taking on the challenge and the struggle of realizing yourself in your entirety and realizing as much of your potential as humanly possible. And again, there's no time constraint. You don't have to do it in a day, an hour, a week, a month, a year. You can do it in 50 years, 60 years, 70 years if it takes that long. Time's meaningless with regards to coming into your own and self-actualizing. You just take as much time as you need. But remember, the requirement is to train those three components of each and every individual: mind, body, and spirit. So if you're able to address that and you're able to consistently show up and do what's required, and I understand the difficulty in the struggle trying to maintain a job so that you can have economic resources so you can just keep yourself alive. But somewhere in there, you have to commit time to yourself, into the realization of yourself. Well, what more worthy goal could there possibly be? All right? Because it opens the door to all forms of love. Right? Because if you don't love yourself, don't respect yourself, you're incapable of doing it for others. Then commit the time and evolve. You can direct your own evolution. Revolution of consciousness. But you do it. You have to show up and do the work. No one can do it for you. Right? And you can't institutionalize it. You can't create, the school of enlightenment. All of that stuff detracts from you doing it. As much as you might think that, a center of education might actually foster. No. You share with each other the information and then you do the work. It's a solo exploration and a solo job. And you do it on your own. And then ultimately then you experience the fullness of the rewards because it was a solo effort. Right? And then that translates eventually down the road to better quality relationships. Right? So that's really what this conversation is about. That all these are requirements for you to have successful relationships, or otherwise you're looking at relationships that are broken. Right? That's what you can expect. Right? And I don't know about you, but I would rather wait a lifetime to have a good quality relationship than to just live a long life and have a multitude of broken relationships. I don't see the value. Right? So instead of committing to a relationship first, commit to honoring all your potential first. Then, as a result of that, then you actually then have something to that you can genuinely share with a partner in a relationship.
It's definitely not a good excuse to not work on things.
No, 100%. Right? But, part of the problem is indifference. Most of us lack interest, concern, or even sympathy and don't give a shit. Because we just got caught up in this game of effort, reward, right? Because it speaks to how well trained we are, that the only thing that you want is a job so that you can have access to greater monetary rewards, so that you can buy shit you don't need, spend money to try and create experiences that are fleeting and temporary, and that you build your entire life around. Or you could build a life that's completely rewarding, satisfying, has nothing to do with any of that shit. And it doesn't mean that those things aren't concerns, but you don't make them priority. Right? So you take vacations and travel when you can. You you enjoy the things that you can purchase with that monetary gain, but you don't invest any value in that shit. That's just stuff to creature comforts to make your life a little more interesting. But you are ultimately the most interesting thing. And if you spent time realizing your potential, you'd be even more interesting. So that's, again, no matter how, it's funny, no matter how we discuss this, and someone can accuse me of a bias of this idea of like, I'm biased towards people realizing who they are. I'm going, yeah, okay, maybe guilty as charged. But in that bias, it's not selfish. And I don't have the expectation that you should go out and do it. I'm just putting it forward as an idea, right? You're not supposed to believe me, remember, right? Right from the outset. You figure it out or don't. I don't fucking care. Right? But this is worth taking the time to sort of explore these ideas and try and be in complete as much as, again, possible in the exploration of the idea. And then the end result is that you start being more of what you imagine that you could be. I don't know. To me, there's greater value in that. Right?
It's definitely better than the school of self-fulfillment. Like you go there, they cram your head full of ideas, and then they go, okay, your homework, uh, don't do things that feel great. Don't do things like riding a bike or going for a jog or good conversation. They'll give you homework.
Well, I mean, again, sometimes unappealing homework is a requirement.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But again, it should always be about balance, right? Always about balance. So there's so many considerations, so much to think about. You could understand why somebody would fear the very things that we're talking about, because they might find it they'd find it fearful because it just reminds them of their inadequacies. Right, but that's on them. That's how they personally are interpreting what's being said, and so instead of reasoning through it, they respond emotionally to it. And remember, fear is a self-protective primal emotion that evokes a biochemical and emotional response. Right, so part of the realization of self is the maturity and the management of emotions. So you become better at regulating them, and again, that's why I often spoke to the benefits of meditation. It's one of the many benefits, but emotional regulation, that you'll cultivate the capacity now to not allow for random emotions to inform your judgments. Why would you allow something that's only designed to be transient and temporary to suddenly start dictating your actions?
It might be helpful to find something more temporary to think about as something,
or something more permanent, rather, like being present. So if you're not, so instead of diverting your attention to what you're feeling, you hyper focus your attention on the current moment. You just simply start paying attention, and then you're in that action. You kind of liberate yourself from your feelings, because they're not the focus anymore. Focus is what is currently happening, what's going on right now, here and now.
I was thinking like skill development of any kind, but you got to pair that with, like you said, the awareness of the moment.
Sure.
Initially, I was trying to say, like, we're all gonna pass away eventually. Maybe it's good to go, okay, I'm going to be there eventually. How do I want that to look?
Well, you have to work towards that.
Right.
Again, it's goal setting and then going out of your way to achieve those very goals, right?
Right. Like if you don't want to be alone in those last moments, maybe think, okay, people are valuable to me. Like how am I going to build the proper relationships I need? What relationships do I need? It's like, it's not necessarily like we all have the same goal. Like we want to be there, but if we're going to be there someday, what's the best lead up? What's the story we want to live through? How are we going to live?
Okay, so I think that you're talking about the experiences you have on your way there. Yeah. Those experiences can grow right out of the training that you adopt to address your mind, your body, and your spirit. So because you'll accumulate experience in the midst of experiencing those methods of training that'll uh, uh, bring your attention to the present moment, address your physical and psychological and spiritual concerns. That you address all those elements, and you live that stuff over the course of years, and then eventually what you end up finding is that realized potential. You won't even know when it happens because you'll be too busy experiencing what it's like to have your potential realized. And then you'll have the ultimate realization that there's more potential to fulfill.
It's kind of like how you say if you have a question in the journey of answering it, you find the better question that you should have asked.
Right. So in informing yourself, the best thing that should arise from the learning and relearning and unlearning things is that you will develop a greater understanding. Right. That's where it leads to, just greater degrees of understanding, and then in the course of the greater degrees of understanding, then uh, the more complete realization of your potentials. So it's incremental. It's not like you suddenly like crack the shell of the egg of potential. Now you're flooded by the potential. It happens incrementally as you're having experiences while you're trying to develop mind, body, and spirit. And then in the course of doing that, you won't see it. You won't realize it. Others will. They'll see it in you. Right? And then you'll have moments of realizing, oh, like I have come a real long way. Isn't that fantastic? So then you'll have this immense sense of accomplishment and reward. And then ultimately, then what you'll realize is that there's still room for more growth. There's still room for better and greater degrees of understanding, that it never has to end, that you can inform an entire lifetime devoted to all of that. Right? So then you'll carry all of that over into your personal relationships. So then you'll end up having the highest quality personal relationships as a result of trying to realize all of your potentials to the fullest of your ability. Right? And that should it will evolve and change as you evolve and change as a human being. Right? Can I get a time check?
Oh, it's 5:09. No way that's true. No, it's 5:09.
Okay. How long are we in?
We're an hour and 50 minutes in.
50?
An hour and 50, yep.
Damn, that. And barely even. I never did, and we didn't really get into divorce. But I'm kind of done with the conversation. I don't know. How do you
divorce with the conversation?
Well, I just wanted to, because remember we talked about relationships, and just to give an idea of how prevalent the failing of relationships are. Maybe gonna end on not such a cheery note, but divorce rates of married couples in Canada is higher than actually in the U.S. In Canada, it's 48%, and in the U.S., it's 45%. So it's still a considerable number. And then it doesn't address the question of the remaining percentage. How many of them are truly in healthy and balanced relationships? And so again, it could be. I don't think it'd be too unrealistic to say that maybe 1/5 or maybe even 1/3 of relationships that are considered successful are probably not the most healthiest relationships. So it's a sad state of affairs, but it might be more of a reflection on the state of individuals themselves. So again, kind of super important, the idea of self-love and self-respect. Until you're able to achieve that state of being, what are you really bringing to any other relationship? And I just want to quickly cover why people get divorced. So lack of commitment is the big one, and it's 75% of people who get divorced. Infidelity is the next one, so that means affairs and that sort of thing. And it's about 60%. Too much conflict in the family, it's another 57%. Young age, marrying very young, 45%. Financial issues, 36%. Substance abuse, 34%. Domestic violence, 23%. And all those are just simply examples of individual failing, right? And we're humans. We make mistakes, but I think the point is to learn from the mistakes. But if you walk into any relationship with assumptions, particularly ones that tell you that you know everything you need to know, it's again a recipe for disaster. It just makes for poor quality relationships, poor quality individuals, poor quality relationships. Shouldn't surprise anybody. That line of reasoning's fairly sound. High quality individuals, you might be able then to see that it's likely then you would have high quality relationships, and not just the interpersonal ones, like the love based ones, or like that are about intimacy and trust, but all relationships, right? So again, it speaks to what we were talking about in terms of compassionate love and unconditional love, and that you demonstrate those and others benefit from it, right? So then it speaks to the quality of your interactions. So which an interaction with anyone is a relationship. So then now it can inform all your relationships. The beauty is you have the capacity within you to be a highly realized human being who's of a high quality, and then therefore be involved in high quality relationships. They won't be free from trouble, right? But you increase the likelihood of successful interactions. So I think that's all I've got to say. Is that good enough? Good enough for you? Good enough for me?
Let's just delete this recording. No, it was great.
No, are you insane?
Yes.
I just ran my mouth for 2 hours.
Are you insane?
Are you insane?
Tuesday?
Okay, so what I would like to say in closing is question everything, including yourself, especially yourself. Seek balance, seek knowledge, seek understanding. Become a renegade, individualist, humanist, critical, objective thinker. Thank you for your time. Have a wonderful evening.